Welcome to the Heroes of Reality podcast, a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Hey, Denise, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you about virtual reality and health. But let's kick things off with what you've been up to recently. What's been new on your plate?
Well, I sort of have two hats. On the one hand, I am a communicator, writer, consultant, host of events, all promoting digital health and patient engagement. And on the other, I co-founded and manage a platform called VR for Health, whose purpose is to present curated information to professionals and patients about the use of virtual reality therapeutically.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What really got you in the whole areas of e-health and VR? What was your origin story of that?
Yeah, I've been in this for quite some time, and I think that growing up and being a young adult a long time ago prepared me for that, or set the stage for wanting digital health to exist. In my family, a close relative of mine, my father, had a health condition, cardiac condition, that required constant attention, and there were no distance tools that could do that. And my uncle was a professor of medicine, and had my father not had access to this person who could realize that something was wrong, get him into the hospital at the last minute, he would have died even sooner. And on the other hand, in the other part of the family, without this, without the contact with that uncle, there were many medical situations that went poorly treated. So I was already aware of the problem of quality. And then I worked for a pharmaceutical company at one point in marketing, and discovered that for any one profile of patient, you would have a whole variety of strategies, treatment strategies and approaches to the patient. And I thought, this isn't right. So when I learned of the internet, which was in the mid-90s, because what I'm telling you about was before then, I thought this was going to really make a big difference, that we would solve so many of these problems right away because everyone would have access to this information and make the right decisions. And in fact, no, we've been progressing over the past 25 years, but there's still so much more to do than what we have achieved.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we're constantly evolving and figuring things out, and I feel like technology is always a 5-pound bag you're trying to shove 10 pounds of crap in. It's progressively moving along that path as we go through it. So let me ask you this question. In terms of you talking about e-health or telehealth, how do you see that merging with virtual reality? What have you seen? What excites you about that path?
Well, e-health itself is a whole universe. At the moment, given the number of headsets being sold, we can't say that virtual reality is going to overtake medicine in the short run. But at some point, it could make a huge difference for a majority of people, because virtual reality brings non-pharmacological solutions to many things that we currently don't solve as best as we could. And there would be less need for anesthesia, for traditional anesthesia. People with chronic pain might have less recourse to addictive products. Anxiety could certainly be under better control. And then there's the whole world of rehabilitation, retraining parts of the body that virtual reality is better known for. And what is great at the present time compared to the past is that this information goes out much more than it used to the consumer at large, to the professional at large. So hopefully there can be some pull making the system move towards these things. Right now, what I see as a major shift is the introduction of artificial intelligence potentially into everything, because all of the things that we're creating with digital health, because digital is binary, we're counting things, constantly collecting more data. It means that artificial intelligence is going to be more and more useful to optimize how we improve. So I see that as the basis. And artificial intelligence can work on any of the other applications, including virtual reality. It could allow you to see what gets the best results for the person and to capture and analyze so much information.
Have you seen artificial intelligence integrating with virtual reality for health?
I think that there is work going on in the headsets in terms of analyzing. They can analyze very finely the movements of the head, or capturing, as we put more and more sensors into this, capturing all the rest. How is the heart rate going? What is going on with breathing? But I can't say that I'm aware, and I'm certainly not an encyclopedia of knowledge of all that's going on in virtual reality, but I'm not aware of a particular application that's available that has gone through the hoops with that.
Yeah, all this technology is merging together, right? It's like someone invented a wheel, someone invented an engine, someone invented a steering wheel, and these are all things being bolted together. So at some part, AI, biofeedback, virtual reality, all these things are coming together to really kind of create a whole universe that allows us to connect in better ways.
And I think that with the COVID epidemic, what's really interesting is that the teleconsult became sort of like an intersection, a boulevard around which all of this could develop, because with the teleconsult, then you want more connected objects. The more you have the connected objects, the more data you're connecting, then you're going to run the artificial intelligence through it, et cetera, et cetera.
Artificial intelligence is a fascinating topic. It's so wide ranging, right? You have convolutional neural networks. You have specific intelligence. You have general intelligence. You have Skynet as the super intelligence. In what ways have you seen artificial intelligence fundamentally shifting the health industry or e-health?
Well, one area that I think has a real need, a couple of things, where things are happening is in medical imagery. It turns out that performing an X-ray in the emergency department is one of the most common things that they do. And depending on where you are and where you are in the world, you may or may not have the availability of a radiologist. It may be the emergency physician analyzing this. So to have, and that's what hospitals or clinics are starting to do, to have software that gives you an opinion on is this X or Y, is having a certain uptake. So there is even a company I'm aware of in Europe that's decided to be the Netflix of this. In other words, they are going to create some of their own, they are creating some of their own apps by working with doctors, understanding their needs for very specific use cases. I'm not going to say it's the left arm X-ray software, but it is different kinds of X-ray situations. And they're also hosting software that is proposed by other companies, because a startup has a hard time scaling up. And I think that the idea of having a software platform for these AI-powered X-ray support diagnostic support tools is pretty smart.
Yeah. Yes, it's super interesting stuff, and that's the thing that people don't realize is that artificial intelligence is in a very specific use case, right? There's very specific things it can do. It's not like a general computer can do general things, right? Versus a factory line rubber stamp machine. That's a very specific and narrow use case, and that's kind of where we're at with artificial intelligence. So
right.
Yeah.
We're not far enough for it to replace us. And
yeah.
I think that it would be important to get the word hybrid out. I think for the foreseeable future, we're living in a hybrid world. People have always been worried that digital would come in and take the humanity out of medicine. But I think that we're going to need both. It would be like you can't have you can't have just a machine running something. You can't just have a human.
Yeah, 100%. Well, technology is nothing more than the magnification of the human intent, right? So you use technology, all the best technologies connect us better. The airplane, the cell phone, the internet, what we're currently on right now, podcasting. I mean, these are all technologies that allow us to enhance the human connection, right? And so that's people sometimes, they try to slice and dice it, and it's just not. We are part of the technology that we're growing with. We are evolving with it. Like, find me a human that doesn't use a cell phone or a computer in this modern society. It just doesn't exist,
right.
Unless you're a Quaker, and that's an option. That's another path you can go down. But for the most part, I mean, we are merging with it in some way, shape, or form. How do you feel about that?
That we are merging with the
technology? Yeah.
The technology. We've been doing this since time began, from caveman on. Even primates use tools.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the nature of the tools that is changing. So I've never been worried about that. Where I would have concerns are if, for reasons of lack of staff, they would say, okay, well, it's just going to be the decision of the software and nobody's going to weigh in on it. But and there might be cases where there is no doctor present, and at least have that. But
isn't that funny though? Like let's just take a look at that real quick. You're right. It's a human in a loop. Nobody wants anybody to make critical life or death decisions by having it done by a machine, even though the machine is possibly more competent than humans. I mean, we have often made errors to the detriment of our own lives and other people. How many times have doctors messed up prescriptions? How many times have judges messed up sentences? How many times have people messed up driving on a car? But if you look at like driving in a fully automated vehicle, people would rather make their own decision and have agency and crash their own car, even though they know that they're more likely to crash their own car than to fully rely on an autonomous vehicle that might kill them way, way less, but at least it was their own decision and or mistake to make that happen. It's a really interesting conundrum that we'd rather have agency to our own detriment than trust in a computer, even though it's probably more likely to actually be in the right. It's an interesting...
You're right. You brought up one of the most complicated ones, the autonomous driving situation, where they say you have a choice between hitting your grandmother or hitting the wall and killing your passenger. Which one do you do?
It's interesting though that we want control, right? And we need control, and it feels safe to have control, even though you're like in our own right, we can't be trusted as much as a machine can be. Some cases, right? And other times, not so much. They're a bit flawed, but we're getting that very specific use case, right? So I'm wondering, how long before we have that fully autonomous vehicle, before we actually will trust the computers enough to be like, you know what, it's got my back. I feel a little bit about. You ever use Waze, the app Waze?
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because Waze will recommend these weird paths to me to get past traffic. And for the longest time, I was like, this isn't right. You don't know what you're doing. But there were so many times that it just brought me down to a path where I was like, oh my God, this is better. Driving through someone's neighborhood, going past someone's front lawn, waving at their kid, going along the path. It's interesting. And then after a while, I was like, you know what? I give up. You win. I'm just gonna say that you got it better figured out than I do. I'm just gonna trust you ways. Of course, now my life isn't in the line, but just my overall pride of thinking that I know better in terms of directions than it does. So I'm wondering how long we let that with for life-threatening analysis.
I would trust Waze immediately.
Yeah.
But in this whole question of man versus machine, we haven't pronounced very much the word patient yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is another big opportunity for people with startups to try and find out more ways to engage, to have patients contribute to the whole medical and health process. We don't even know what we're missing. As we go with something that's very quantitative, we're missing out on just human dialogue. And no matter what you do, technologists want to take it and then analyze it and turn it into graphs. But I think that there is so much power in what the patients are thinking and experiencing that we could apply to the healthcare process. And I have one startup example, which is 11 Health. Do you know them?
No, I don't.
So it's a company that started by a patient who passed away in 2020. He started this, I don't know, about 7. I mean, he was always on the brink of passing away, given his condition, which is that he'd had a colon transplant, and then with the immunosuppressor products, he would get cancer, and so all these different things happening to him. But this company is entirely built on patient knowledge of how you could improve upon the stomy, the pouches that people wear who have these challenges with their colon. This company has done wonders for the patients in this. It could never have been thought through.
What do they do? I'm sorry.
So they produce sensor-laden stomy for people who don't have a colon, who wear the pouch.
Oh, interesting. That's cool. That's really interesting. Yeah, I've heard of something similar. A friend of mine, CEO of a company called DocBot. Not the same exact thing, but you basically swallow this pill, and there's like little cameras on it, and it can go through the liver, and it can use that to detect cancer moving through the body in very specific areas. I think it's liver, something like that.
Yeah, this is different. The idea is that as the pouch fills up, the sensor will tell you when you need to change it. It will tell you the biological nature of what is in it, and it's a product that would go through hospitals. But I mean, I don't work with them. This person who passed away was a friend, but who for his whole life was ill with Crohn's disease, and tried to sort out the situation of how to take advantage and bring the patient in and make things better.
Isn't that funny? I don't mean like ha funny, but isn't it interesting how the pain that people suffer puts them on a mission to try to solve that pain and alleviate it in others. Try to like, like you've had, family health issues that then puts you on a mission, and someone else's pain and suffering. And it's a really interesting thing how we sometimes try to avoid the pain that we face, but in other times we use it as fuel to help us to solve that pain in other people's lives. And it's a very interesting human condition that we.
Yes, I agree with you. I often ask people how they chose their profession, what they do, and it's quite often in response to a certain problem or thing or something around them. Because if you've never seen it, experienced it, heard of it, it's hard to do it.
Yeah, and you're not. There's not as much motivation. You don't feel it unless you see the pain in others or you feel it yourself.
And I have run a number. One of the things I do is to run startup contests. I've run a number of startup contests, get to know hundreds of startups, and what you say is true. Quite often, it's because of someone in their family or their own situation that they realize there was X that could be done that might shift things.
The origin stories of a superhero. When you say you run a number of startup events, is that hackathons, or what is it specifically when you say events?
at certain medical conference, well, it used to be at my own physical conference, which I don't do anymore, but that was called Doctors 2.0. But at many conferences, it can be an activity to sensitize professionals to what's out there in the way of startups in their field. So someone might say, I'm getting together this category of professionals. Can you create a way to make this exciting and have them learn about it? So I can propose an event within the event that would start beforehand, of having startups submit on the theme of whatever specialty it is. And then you could involve the professionals in judging from the audience, as well as have a jury. You can set up some form, I guess, digital or real exhibit stands. We have found that this is an interesting add-on to conferences for professionals.
Yeah, pitch fest almost. So people are coming in on topic.
Pitching, but they're not pitching for money. They're pitching to get feedback and to get exposure. And it's different from a hackathon where you're starting from scratch on a particular problem mostly. I think that they're fascinating. Then I often fear, what's going to happen next, because sometimes it's even a hackathon where people just meet during the hackathon and they may not be able to follow up together. I like the idea of supporting a startup that has gotten to a prototype and actually has something to show that can work, and exposing them to a number of healthcare professionals or patients to get feedback.
I've ran a number of hackathons in virtual reality since 2014. Hosted, judged, organized, all that stuff, and very often they're terrible things that don't have any life, but occasionally they come off and they're pretty incredible stuff. I'll tell you about one use case just relevant to this conversation. I was a judge of the Creating Reality Hackathon, the lead judge over at USC, University of Southern California. And this one team got together and they took shaky cam AI, and they put it inside VR. And they put that inside VR for the controllers. And the use case they used it for was for people with Parkinson's. And so people like that would normalize the hand. So then in VR, they could actually have a quality of life in paint. And then they used that and they fed it through an AI system, very much like training phantom limb syndrome in order to release one hand through the other thing, right? Typical use case. That they took it, and so that you could train, and they would be given symbols, and then the AI would look at it and feed them back instructions on what they need to do. At least that's a theory that they had, but they're actually able to produce a result where if you did this inside VR, it would just normalize out. And it was one of the best use cases that I've seen of taking kind of a standard AI technology, if you want to call it such, and then being able to integrate that with VR for a very practical, tactical use case that not only instantly increased the quality of life for somebody, but also allowed them to be able to use it to feedback for more trainings to enable people in the future. So it's pretty interesting stuff. But a blending of AI and VR technology together is pretty cool stuff. Yeah. Have you? What for you has been the most interesting things that doing these pitch fests that have stood out to you? That you're like, oh wow, that's super incredible, or that's really innovative. Have there been any of those things that stood out to you as like oh my god moments?
Well, quite often the emotion of it stands out, that somebody's coming up there and really pitching with their guts the whole story. There was one which was for pregnancy-induced diabetes. This was a man whose dad is a professor of endocrinology, I guess, and who had sort of taken a subspecialty interest in this field. And they all knew that it's very important to have regular contact with the woman during the pregnancy to monitor this and modulate it, whatever, I don't know exactly, whatever treatments are required. And the son, who became a bit of a geek, realized that he could take his father's Excel sheets and do something with that. And he and another person created a startup. That startup won contest one year, which we had a partnership with Stanford Medicine, and so I accompanied them there, and they presented on stage. And several years later, they're still going. They are present in many hospitals. This is French, so I don't know if they're not yet planning to go to the U.S. because European startups realize that the level of investment required is higher because it's such a larger place.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I love it when someone they're just laying around and they're like, oh, I could do something with these Excel spreadsheets. And then they take it and
realizing that it could become, and that with his father's contacts, he was able to test it out, to get into a few departments.
That's great.
Yeah. Another, there's so many amazing startups. There's a woman I know whose male companion passed away, and he'd had cancer. He'd suffered a lot, and she created a tool called Bliss, which was recently presented at ASCO 21, which is a virtual reality program or set of programs for both the professionals themselves to reduce their anxiety, but also for patients' anxiety and for procedures. So she's been at this for 10 years.
Wow.
And she created her startup as a social enterprise. It's a not-for-profit.
Oh, that's awesome. That's beautiful. Let me ask you, what was the genesis for you in terms of VR for health? Like what sparked that? What kicked that off? What was really
that is a great question. I have always loved engaging with patients, whether it was inviting them myself to be speakers or just interviewing them. And I had contacted Cedars-Sinai to ask if they were going to launch a new conference called Virtual Medicine, if there was a spot for me to get involved with patients on stage, and there was. So I hosted a session that everybody loved, when you get the patients to explain what's going on. And I came back the second year, and the second year in the audience, there was a former patient who came up to me and said, I heard you want this virtual reality to become a thing sooner rather than later. That's my goal too. I'd had cancer. If only I could have used this for meditation and other things. Nobody helps you. You're just there with the treatment. And the idea that being in VR accelerates time. Mm-hmm. This is a very important observation by patients. It's a perception they have that when they're wearing the headset, the time just goes by like this, as opposed to while you're in labor, for example, or that you're in a painful situation. So that woman, Beth, became a co-founder. In fact, I would say it was even Beth who was the instigator of creating VR for Health. Let's do something together. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. What do you think is the mechanism that causes time to move quicker in VR?
I don't know. I'm not going to make something up in front of thousands of,
I make up things all the time on here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess maybe in meditation as well, it does. But
it could. I've definitely done meditations that time flies by.
People usually say, "Oh, it's the distraction."
Yeah.
But,
is there anything in like VR that you've tried personally that you find be mind blowing or soothing, or anything you use on a regular basis? Are there any pieces of that you've tried the VR technology and you're like, oh, that is something that's impressive, or you like, or anything that really stands out?
The experience is immediate. As soon as it's something you can't really describe until people try it. They can't sense that. The very first time that I tried was at a conference, Games for Health, because VR does border on gaming. Some of the people come to that from the world of gaming because you create sort of games, fictional scenarios. And I tried two things at that time. One was you get into a glass elevator, and as you move your head up and down, you're going up and down. And I thought that was amazing. This was created for people who would be afraid of heights. I didn't have that problem, but I thought that this was such an exciting experience.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the second thing was the rehab. This was a rehab for the eyes, where you are wearing the headset and you're pointing with your eyes at different things that appear. I think that is amazing. Other than that, my experience has been more with just simple relaxation, like trip or something. So
yeah, those are all beautiful experiences. It can be used for a bunch of different reasons.
But I would say that the most two amazing things. One is speaking with women who have delivered using VR. That
like birth.
Birth.
They've been at birth of it. What are they? Is it like soothing activities? What are they? I'm literally in the other room.
It occupies them in the same way as it would for anything else, and they will explain that when they're told, "Okay, now we're ready for some of the final pushes," they're really surprised. So I had interviewed on stage a woman who had at that point done it for. I think she's had like 3 children with this method, thanks to having a with-it doctor who was aware of this, because she'd had a first birth where with the anesthesia, she felt that she couldn't bond right away with the child, was a bit groggy or something. So she was, I think that was brave of her 3-4 years ago to try this.
I will pass that message. There's a woman in the next room. My best friend. She's 8.75 months pregnant, and she's due any moment.
I hope that she can find the solution in that place where she's going, because so that is pretty amazing.
That's impressive. Yeah, that's incredible. Great. And so is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you can tell people how they can get a hold of you?
Well, we at VR for Health are open to partners who have a do good or a tech for good project in mind. We'd like to work with them, a tech for good project in mind that we could design around the use of virtual reality for health. So, just any number of either vulnerable populations or people with a certain medical condition. And in particular, my partner would set up a multiple partnership that could make that happen. So if people are listening and want to do that, be happy to hear from them. Or if they have content that they think, like video content that is informative, didactic, we are happy to take that.
Beautiful. Awesome. I'm sure there are people listening that would be very much interested in that. So if you have an idea or a product, or you're in the areas of VR for Health and you have some super awesome content, please reach out to VR for Health and Denise here, and she can take care of that.
Yeah. Looking for healthcare professionals, medical students, whatever, who'd like to contribute.
Beautiful. Denise, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate you getting up or staying up late and being here with me. I know we're across continents here, so
it's not late yet. It's the end. It's the end of the working day. It's not late.
It's not late. Okay, great. Well, I very much appreciate you and appreciate your time. Have a blessed and beautiful day, and I will see you in another reality.
You too, Dylan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise. Bye now. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on